Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our RSI recorded webcast series. I know it's been a hot second, but we are back. So as you guys all know, our webcast recordings have been developed in support of the articles, blog posts, and podcast episodes that you can find on our website, which is www.restaurantaccountingservices.com inside of our resource center. And just as a reminder, if you haven't been there in a while, you can also find relevant restaurant industry trends and topics like budgeting. We've got stuff on food costing, menu engineering. We've got things on labor management, hospitality compliance, and so much more. Just so you guys know, if you've got any questions during today's presentation, just go ahead and tweet them to us using our handle at RSI Operations with the hashtag compliance.
Yeah, compliance, our good old friend compliance, which once was only a large restaurant group issue, has invited himself to dinner at our independent operators party and taken a permanent seat at the head table.
How kind.
Aggressively starting 24 months ago, we've been witnessing a plethora of wage and hour as well as benefit laws coming into effect each year. Every restaurant is tasked with the challenge of acquiescing to the latest legislation. Legislation, I might add, with standards that vary widely between state, Department of Labor, and federal sectors.
Right, and of course, these new laws are creating multiple layers of confusion and uncertainty on several fronts, right?
Yeah.
So first, trying to figure out if you're subject to the law or regulation. Next, finding someone to interpret the law or regulation. And then finally, how to do it so that the experience for your guest, your team, and of course your profit isn't compromised. So with this in mind, we've taken the top 3 issues that have hit our compliance department's desk, and then we have broken them out for you. So the issues we're going to discuss during today's webcast are all topics we have talked about before, but in this webcast, we're going to address them more from a compliance-based management standpoint. So we've got, of course, our minimum wage and tip credit. We've got our service charge, and finally, we are going to talk about the tip pooling.
I'll take that minimum wage and tip credit on first. There are numerous states currently trying to push the minimum wage up to a certain standard, which is generally about $15. Unfortunately, many of these states do not have a tip credit as well. So what does this mean? Well, in other words, paying a cook and a server the same wage without taking into consideration that the server brings home tips in addition to their minimum wage. What a nice job to have, right? Well, frustrated operators are left trying to level out this disparity, and they're trying to redistribute their wages to ensure that all team members who are not customarily tipped are properly compensated. Enter the service charge and tip pool that we'll hash out later.
Awesome. So let's talk about the enormous, and I mean enormous, benefits of servers claiming all their tips. And there are many reasons why your servers should claim all their tips taken home. We've talked about this before as best practice for years, especially with the proportion of credit card tips to cash tips. As an owner and operator, it's absolutely necessary to place those charge tips on checks. It's going to directly assist with any issues of underclaiming from your team members. You see, guys, when an individual isn't claiming enough, their minimum wage is going to get bumped up to meet those federal standards, which is also known as admin wages, and that is a hurdle you do not want to face. It's more than keeping your eye on the ball as an owner. It's an opportunity to educate your employees on the benefits of claiming all those tips.
Yeah, we see it time and time again. Servers wrongfully assume that I'm not going to claim a portion of my tips because my paycheck's going to be smaller. Well, here's the problem with that assumption. Just because they have higher cash on hand at the moment doesn't mean it won't come back to haunt them when they're going to try to get a car or a home, or basically anything that requires a FICO score.
Right, exactly. So let's say, for example, you're a server who didn't claim all of your tips and now you want to go buy a house. Well, guess what? When you go to secure a loan at the bank, they're going to review your payroll histories to see how much money you've made over a certain period of time. Whoops, it's not going to look like you take home as much money as you're actually taking. There goes that loan. Hence, one of the many reasons it's so important for operators to step in and watch the amount of claimed tips to ensure it's being credited appropriately. All right, next up, we've got our service charge, or as our Director of Compliance, Brian Smith, likes to describe it, an enigma wrapped in special sauce. It's not a tip, so it can't bring your employees up to that minimum wage. Rather, it's part of the bill. And with that, most states charge a sales tax on it, and it's exactly how operators are trying to collect the funds to redistribute to those non-tipped employees. We've spoken about these service charges, the guest perception, etc., in depth in our previous podcasts.
Yeah, from a compliance standpoint, the biggest issue with a service charge is that it's part of the overtime calculation, and it will increase that overtime rate dramatically if a team member has logged any overtime hours. The impact that the service charge has on overtime rate is astronomical because the calculations have gotten so freaking convoluted. I mean, we've witnessed this firsthand. Let's say you have someone that is working 2 job codes where one is tipped and the other is non-tipped, and they hit overtime with that non-tipped job code. We've seen it based on the calculation and the added service charge where the overtime calculated rate can be less than the non-tipped base wage.
That's nuts to me.
Yeah. So overtime is calculated 1.5 times the regular rate, and the regular rate is calculated by all payments to the employee, service charges, then divided by the number of hours worked.
So simple.
Yeah. With employees working any combination of tip versus non-tip job codes, the point of sale system isn't even coming close to accurately measuring what's happening in these complicated situations.
Yeah, I really don't even know how it could. So, I mean, I'm sure at this point, you all out there are scratching your head thinking what we're thinking. How do we even begin to manage those situations? Here it is, you guys, my shameless plug. You've got to find a restaurant accounting system, RSI, where the payroll system has been specifically built to accept those corrections. This ensures that from a compliance perspective, both you, the operator, as well as your staff, are constantly in compliance. More importantly, you're notified when situations arise that cause you to fall out of compliance. It is so mind-boggling and quite frankly stupid to try and slide the timetable back at the end of each period and review each employee's payroll with the intent that you're going to validate that their tips brought them up to the minimum wage. It's so reactionary, and it also opens you up for adjusting someone's claimed tips or hours. A practice in today's world where everyone has a cousin who's a wage and hour attorney looking to file a class action lawsuit on your restaurant. Womp womp. Just remember that this is another non-revenue producing activity that should be left to the technology and industry experts that can handle it for you. Don't try and go at it alone.
No. All right, so let's tackle the tip pooling. So keeping in style with the rest of compliance legislation, tip pooling is unfortunately not as straightforward as one would think. No surprise there, right? It has become a raging hot topic, especially in the states that do not allow a tip credit. You may recall that the Ninth Circuit got involved and stated that an operation can't pool and then include non-customarily tipped employees as part of the pool, meaning back of the house people for those of you playing home game. So let's dig a little deeper into this. What then does the Department of Labor describe as a non-customarily tipped employee?
Let me tell you, Kat, and here's where it gets pretty fun. So Brian, our director of compliance, came across a client a few weeks back inquiring about the position of their expediter. So he did what he does, a little bit of research, and reviewed the Department of Labor's field handbook, which, to me sounds like a little light fun reading for the weekend. And here's exactly what he found about that non-customarily tipped employee. So the Department of Labor does not say that an expediter is a customarily tipped employee, but at the same time, they also do not say that an expediter isn't a customarily tipped employee. Yeah, it's a lot of gray area, and in more cases than not, that's exactly what Brian's been finding across the board. So, it could be that certain positions, such as expediter, may have different function from one restaurant to another, leaving that door wide open for interpretation within certain job codes.
Yeah, you got to keep in mind, this isn't as simple as Googling something, reading it, and complying with the law. It's both your job and title function within the restaurant. It would behoove an owner or operator to align themselves with experts who can dissect the law and provide knowledgeable educational explanations and feedback from their research.
Absolutely. Attempting to navigate through the myriad of compliance-related laws and regulations is mind-numbing, and ultimately it places you at risk of losing your business. So utilize the resources that are available to you and make sure that your strategies for managing your organization's compliance are 1, well-researched by someone other than yourself and Google, 2, continuously reviewed by what you're trying to do and what you're actually doing, again, by someone other than yourself and Google.
To learn more about compliance and a special bonus topic on PTO or paid time off, with the no one-size-fits-all rule that comes along with it, check out our most recent Operating a Profitable Restaurant podcast episode. If you have any questions or would like to see our tools in action, please don't hesitate to reach out and request a demo.